Good afternoon, it's wine o'clock here again at the Wine Man's. In today's video, I'm going to be answering a question from a very established client of mine who I've known for, I don't know, maybe 30 years. Now, they emailed me recently with a question. They were talking about food and wine pairing and matching and what goes well with certain things and why didn't I necessarily put individual wines with individual foods. The big problem with that is it's a bit of a fool's game. It's a bit like blind tasting when you see these guys when they're trying, and girls when they're trying to identify a wine. They go, I think this is a Bordeaux from the left field and it's Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc mixed with a little soupçon of Merlot, and then the guy reveals that it is a Pinot Noir from Chile. So it's a little bit of a nightmare. Now, this can often happen when it comes to food and wine pairing. Now, there are golden rules that always should be adhered to in general. White wines go with white meats, fish, chicken, things like that. Red wines go with red meats, steaks, sausages, rich, intense food. Sweet wines go well with desserts. Generally a pretty well thought out thing. Port always goes well with cheese. Now, this doesn't always apply because there's plenty of red wines, for example, that you can enjoy with fish. Beaujolais or the Gamay grape is a great example. Dolcetto is another great example. Pinot Noir often can also go very well with fish and with chicken and light meat dishes. That's because they're slightly lighter in tannins. But equally, I've tried Primitivo, which is a heavier style, very fruit-driven wine. I've tried that with fish and it's quite nice, nothing wrong with it. Equally, I've tried a heavily oaked Chardonnay with a big steak and perfectly enjoyed it. Now, sometimes you're going to get things like this. This is an orange wine. And you think, what in the world does that go with? And to be fair, I've never tried an orange wine. It's certainly not one from Mr. Bertrand. He's one of my favourite growers. And according to this, you should have it with Mediterranean salads and tagine. Haven't had a tagine for a while, so it'll be interesting. And it's a big wine. Certainly looking forward to it. Don't know anything about it, but the whole point of it, of showing you this wine, is not necessarily to tell you about it. It's just to tell you about how some of the hard and fast rules can be very good, but they can also lead us down different paths and why things are not necessarily what we expect them to be. If we look at red wines, for example, an awful lot of people say that you shouldn't chill red wines. But I think I may have covered this in a previous video, but red wines often were chilled because they were kept in cellars and then they were brought upstairs and we used to have them at room temperature. Room temperature was often cold. We didn't have these really hot radiators that make sure that everything in the house is nice and warm. So as a consequence, you can often get red wines that are stewed and not really at the best temperature. And then the same happens with white wines where they're over chilled and you lose an awful lot of the flavour and you get the refreshment. That isn't always the best of things to have with white wines. Interestingly, you get all sorts of things in terms of how long a wine will last when it's open. In my opinion, chuck the cork back in, pop it in the fridge, whether it's a red or a white, that will help it to last a little bit longer. Now, in another video, which I've recently uploaded today, I talked about Elysium Black Muscat, which I found pairs beautifully with chocolate, with dessert, but also with blue cheese. Now, I have tried it with brie and a couple of other softer cheeses, but what it does then is it dominates the flavour of the food. And you don't want that. You want to have it as a harmony. It has to work well within your palate and within your taste buds and what you like. And some of the things that we have, so say for example you're having a big curry, big bold flavours, or a Thai dish or something like, or even a big fiery intense dish from another part of the world where you've got loads of chili and all sorts of things going on. You need something that's going to work well with those flavors. So a Torrontés would be very good because it's nice and vibrant and it's refreshing. Maybe even a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc would work well. But equally, you can pair it in a completely opposite way and you can put a very fruit-driven wine with it. Some wines, if we look at reds, for example, can be really tannic and really not very pleasant to drink on their own. But you put them with a big steak, something like that, what happens then is that the chemical that is going on in your brain, where the saliva is coming in, because your brain cells are working, it's going, aha, we have food here, macerating in the mouth. That's the first form of digestion. That tells your brain, right, we need to send different acids into the body because we're chewing on something here, and it's a red meat because our brain cells tell us that it's a red meat. So then when you whack a little bit of red wine with that, what would previously have maybe been a very, very tannic red wine, suddenly all those tannins, they change when they're in your mouth, where it's just been digesting the red meat. And that means that it digests the red wine and it treats the red wine in a very, very different way, which is why often it's our bodies just helping us to absorb and realize what we're actually having. Now, that can change as well if you decant the wine, if you leave it open for a good few hours. The interesting thing with that is if you open the wine, you're only actually aerating that tiny little bit, because that's the only bit that's getting the oxygen. So that when you pour it into your glass, you're mixing up unaerated with aerated wine. Not always a good idea. So I always recommend to decant anything. Doesn't have to be in a decanter, can be in a nice big jug. Covered this as well in previous videos. So in general, bit of waffle, going off all over the place down different tangents. The food and the wine that's right for you is what is right for you. No one can tell you there is any particular set formula. There are some tried and tested rules, but if you like rosé wine with salad, great. If you like rosé wine with steak, great. If you like white wine with steak, who cares? It's right for you. That's the important thing. It's a bit like me saying to you, no, you mustn't drink that. You just say, well, I like it, and that's okay. Nothing wrong with it at all. So stick with what you like, stick with what you believe in, try and test different things. But always remember here, this is the important thing. Your mood determines how much you'll enjoy a wine. There is a very good reason why when we're chilled out and relaxed on holiday, and Pedro or Giuseppe is coming in and serving us beautiful food in a fabulous surrounding, if we ever had holidays again with this COVID stuff, and they're serving you and you're relaxed and you don't have to worry about work, and it's lovely and warm and the produce is fresh, and they bring the wine and they ceremonially open it and they pour it for you in a beautiful glass, and everyone you look around is having an amazing time. The wine, it's always fabulous. And you buy some and you take it home and you sit down and you put something like EastEnders on, and it's doom and it's gloom and the news is going on and it's telling you that Prince Philip has died and everything is terrible, and you're thinking, this really isn't good, and you open a bottle of the same wine to try and cheer yourself up, but because your brain is operating in a different sphere, nothing tastes the same. Obviously, you're not in the heat. You're not being served by someone. You're not relaxed. Everything is totally different. And sometimes the wine even sulks because it doesn't want to leave its hometown, its home country. That's a little bit of a myth, but it's a nice thing for some of us to cling on to as to why the wine doesn't taste so good. And we often get this with the cheaper wines. If we're in France or in Spain or in Italy and you're going along and you go, but I saw this guy and he was selling it out of the back of a van. It was in €1 for a 5-litre tub, and we all took it home and it was great, and we drank loads of it and it didn't give us a headache, and yet we come back and we buy a bottle of wine for €5 and my head is crippled. And why is that? Because the wine is fresh, it hasn't been adulterated, it hasn't been messed around with, hasn't had any chemicals or any additives or anything in it, and it is just designed to be drunk there and then that day. That's the big, big difference. So try all sorts of different things, experiment, try different foods, see what works for you, make little notes. This particular customer makes notes on luggage tags, little cardboard luggage tags that he attaches around the bottle. It's a great idea. Take pictures of the wines that you like. Make little notes on those. But there's nothing wrong with this. Experimenting and trying different things. I hope you've enjoyed today's little video. If you've got any other questions, hit me up and we'll see what I can do for you. Cheers.